to Royally Unfiltered, the show that takes you behind the palace gates like never before. This is where tradition meets truth and nothing is off limits. This week, helping me tackle all the biggest headlines are some of my favorites. We're already having so much fun before we started recording, so I brace yourselves, royal commentator Emily Andrews and royal author Robert Jobson. This has been such a great week for us, I think, as royal reporters. Emily, your reaction to the Princess of Wales in remission, was there a sigh of relief? Were you grateful? Because a year ago around this time, planned abdominal surgery. A lot of us were confused and at a loss.
I think it's really good news. I mean, obviously, the last time we heard from Kate, or Catherine, as we call her now, was in September when she released the video saying that she'd ended chemotherapy. And there was a bit of confusion at the time because she said then, my focus now is to be cancer-free. But afterwards, Kensington Palace guided that that didn't mean she was in remission. Remission means that when there's no cancer present in the body. So for her to say at her kind of first public engagement of 2025, very appropriately at the Royal Marsden, where she received treatment, and she confirmed when she visited that's where she received her treatment. She also said she was in remission. So yeah, really great news. But as she said herself, cancer journey is a long one, and she's got to focus on, still keeping her health good.
Robert, how did she announce this? Because to me, it felt a little under the radar. I felt like I learned this on Instagram, and then I saw everybody picking it up. It wasn't a formal video. Did you like the way that she announced it, basically by going and visiting with the people that comforted her throughout her treatment and dealing with other patients?
Yeah, as Emily knows, the way that this would be done is the way that the royals tend to do things. I mean, she would have known that there was a royal rota reporter there filming and listening in, and that was then done in that subtle way, rather like when the Queen said about the referendum in Scotland and made that remark there. They know what they're going to say, but she was clearly said it in an informal situation, so it's more subtly done. And I thought it was a wonderful visit. I thought the visit, it was perfect. They mingled it with the fact that they were announcing the patronages and getting involved with the cancer charity as well. Very well handled, and slick, but also there was a real empathy, I think, between her and the patients and the staff when she went to the Marsden. But look, I thought it gave us a bit more of a clue of just how difficult this journey has been, because, I think the way that the press office have dressed it up, it was slightly unclear exactly did she have cancer, or was it cancer before? Was it pre-cancerous treatment? Obviously, nobody really knew that she'd be going to the Marsden. I mean, she was at the London clinic before, and I thought that was interesting. She's talked about going through the front door, and it still made her feel uplifted, and obviously there's been this going on all in the background that nobody really knew, apart from her and the people at the Royal Marsden.
Well, Emily, that's kind of a blessing, because I remember when some of these stories started circulating last year, I did not see it in your neck of the woods, but over here they would have me on TV with a doctor, and then they would ask the doctor to guess what she could have based on a press release. So it's actually really nice to know that she was capable of, behind the scenes, able to function, get her treatment, feel comforted by people, and that it didn't end up in the sun somewhere or something like that.
Well, actually, there are strict regulations controlling what UK newspapers and UK broadcasters can say regarding health, and that's regarded as a very private matter. And so you would go against the code of the newspapers or the broadcasting regulations if you were to speculate on what type of cancer someone in the public eye has if they haven't said, or it would also go against the codes if you would publish any pictures or information where she was receiving her treatment or anything like that. So that's why she was able to to go about things in a very, very private way. After she visited the Marsden, she put a statement out that on social media and said that she was the new patron of the Marsden along with Prince William, but also she was so grateful for the fact that she had been able to, you know, do all these things privately, and all the people who had, I think she phrased it something like, who had walked quietly beside William and I, which I thought was a really nice way to describe the doctors, the nurses, the porters, the cleaners at the Royal Marsden, and a multitude of people who helped her, you know, become cancer free. And so, the reporting here in the UK, I think perhaps has been maybe, I don't know, a little bit different to how it has been in the US. Certainly, there hasn't been any speculation over what kind of cancer she's had, and we don't know. As Rob said, we just don't know what it was. I guess if you know, she had abdominal surgery, cancer cells were found, so then that probably gives you an area of the body, doesn't it? But that's it. And I think it's interesting that actually for Royal, Kate's been very, very open and putting this statement out, going to the Marsden, allowing the cameras in, allowing the cameras to film her talking to patients. As Rob says, you know, she knows that whatever she says to the patients is going to be, you know, transmitted in newspapers, broadcast, radio, podcast. We'll talk about it all around the world. And she's been remarkably open for a woman who in the past has been very kind of private and not wanting to give anything away, and has been a bit of a cipher. And she's much more kind of willing to talk about things now, which is really interesting.
Okay, Jabo, I have a question for you though. Jabo, you just wrote a book about Catherine. Is Catherine shy or is Catherine private? Based on what Emily just said, how do you interpret Catherine's behavior?
Private, not shy. I mean, a woman that dressed up at university in a seafood dress and strutted down a catwalk.
I was a different woman back then too.
But no, I think that she's private, but she's very controlled in what she's doing. Look, I think that one thing about Catherine is she realizes the importance of her role at this moment in time in history in terms of the monarchy, and she knows that there's got to be give and take. But the way that this was organized just shows you, and you'll get an impression, don't you, if you watch the Netflix thing about from dare I mention their names, Harry and Meghan again, you know, a little click, 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 paparazzi everywhere, you can't even take the kids to school. All nonsense, because of course that is just not how it was. As Emily was explaining, there are strict rules in place. And even in this instance, this wasn't Catherine going to hospital for treatment, which is strictly off limits. This was her going on a public engagement, but yet it was very controlled. There was only a rota and photographer, Press Association, one reporter, all inside, of which the rota was tipped. It was told where to be and where to stand. There were no photographers outside because no one else knew it was going on. And so you didn't have any hordes of people behind barriers because there was no information issued about that, or the only information was to the control of the rota. Therefore, it was done in a way that she could then feel relaxed. And actually, in a way, it's better because then she could be more open. Then, if you've got hundreds of people in the room taking notes, it's never going to work. And I think that's why she was able to do it. But she would have known, as Emily said, that all of this would be disseminated amongst the media. It'd be all out there in the picture. So it achieves probably more than if it was just sort of disorganized as it probably used to be.
Emily, actually, this is a question for both of you. I have seen polls last week that said people felt like they didn't want to pressure the Princess of Wales to get back to work. Very sympathetic towards her. There's a quote in the Daily Mail that they attribute to the Princess of Wales. It says, "You think treatment's finished, crack on with that daily tasks, but that's still like a real challenge," she said, and talking, the words totally disappear, understanding that as a patient, yes, there are side effects around treatment, but actually there are more long-term side effects. Knowing the poll, Emily, and hearing a quote like that, do you think that people will continue to give the Princess of Wales grace when it comes to jumping back into her work and putting herself out there? Because that's tough. I mean, I deal with that where you panic when your words disappear. I totally related to that quote. What did you think when you hear her talking about, again, you were talking about how this is a rare moment for her, but will the public be forgiving and kind and show her grace throughout this process?
Yes, I think so. I think the fact there was obviously that really kind of febrile time last February, well, particularly March, before she put out the video at the end of March last year and saying that, you know, she'd started chemo and that cancerous cells had been, that she had cancer. But I think where people were wondering, you know, what was going on and what was happening, I think lessons were learned probably both from Kate and William's point of view, also Kensington Palace communications point of view. And I think that, I think to answer your question, yes, I think the general public are very understanding. Most of us, 1 in 2 of us will experience cancer. All of us know someone, love someone who have had cancer or who's undergoing treatment. So obviously, inevitably, you're going to compare it to your own kind of personal circumstances, or, you know, what you've been through, or what your best friend's been through, or your mum or your son, or, you know, whatever. And so I think people are very understanding, and absolutely she should take her time. And as Rob alluded to, or as Rob said, she is very conscious of her position. She is one of the most important members of the royal family. She's the Queen in waiting. And we don't know. Charles is doing very well, by the way, the King. But obviously, with he's still receiving treatment for his cancer. Again, we don't know what his cancer is. The timeline for her becoming Queen and William becoming King and sort of stepping up to those very top jobs and very demanding and full-on roles is becoming closer. So I think with that in mind, she wants to take the time, get it right. I think Rob's absolutely right. She's a very controlled person, but she's showing more of her steel in a way, whilst telling us more about herself.
Rob, I feel really guilty that we fixate on her disease and less so the King. And I say that not necessarily in our personal discussions, but, you know, when you are called to talk about something on TV, it is typically about the Princess of Wales or another crew that stay in the headlines. Do you feel like the King feels abandoned at all? Do you feel like
No. I think he understands the whole thing clearly. He understands that the media. He you know, he's been around long enough. Married to Princess Diana before this, who was the world's most photographed woman, and, you know, I witnessed all that firsthand. I think he fully understands how fickle we all are in the media. But the reality is, he also understands that the royal family needs a charismatic figure, a photogenic figure like Catherine. She's much more than that, but it does need that touch of glamour to stay relevant. The issue for the King, as Emily is saying, of course, is that he's still undergoing chemotherapy, and, you know, that's a bit of a worry. I mean, it was a bit of a worry when President Trump elect met William, and William was talking, and Mr. Trump was talking about how sad it is and things like that. And we were talking, and it made people think, oh, why is he saying that? Why is it William at Notre Dame meeting the president? Because it's important that William has a relationship with the president-elect and the president pretty soon, going forward over the next 4 or 5 years, you know, 4 years or so, because there needs to be that connection. I think that there's a lot of concern about the King still. We hope and pray that he's doing well, but, you know, we live in the real world, and William will be preparing for what will be, with him and Catherine, becoming public property. You know, as Prince of Wales and Princess of Wales, you're not public property. As the King, you pretty much are. You know, the King and Queen, you're pretty much there as your instrument of state. That's really what you become, and that's a tough job. You know, for the King, I mean, the Queen did so amazingly, you know, all those years, but for the King, it's only going to be a short time, you know, possibly. But with William, it's going to be another long stint in that role. Very difficult when you've got young families. So I think what's happening here is that Catherine and William, but William will obviously have to do public duties more, but Catherine will be prioritising her health, listening to her body and her children. And I think everyone should understand that, because at any time, we don't know, we're in the lap of the gods. There may come a time, 5 years, 10 years, hopefully longer, but they will become king and queen. That is as read. And that's when it's you know, more of a very public, full-on role.
I have a question for both of you, and I'm sorry I didn't prepare you for this, but I have been getting asked this here in the States, and I gasp and go, no, there are all these stories over here circulating that Prince William is seizing power. And I'm like, absolutely not. Thank you. Okay, Emily, your reaction to those headlines or those whispers over here in the States?
Well, I think I think it's a very appealing headline when you don't really have any understanding of royal reporting. I mean, because the thing is, well, what has to happen for William to become king? His father dies. That's horrible.
Who wishes that? Yeah.
Exactly. Who wishes that? None of us. And I think Rob and I obviously both lost our dads. We know how painful that is. You know, for Charles, he had to lose his mother to become king. I mean, it's horrible. It's such a. I feel very, very sorry for heirs to the throne, actually, because it's an invidious position. You know, you get the top job because you lose a parent. It's horrible. So no, absolutely not. And as Rob's just said, if anything, William would want a lot longer to be Prince of Wales, because you don't have the spotlight as much upon you, but you've got all the income from the Duchy of Cornwall, and you don't become the public property you do as monarch.
But also, that's absolutely right. But also, with being, you know, William at the moment he's got things going on that he really can do at the moment. Earthshot, he's put a lot of effort into that, trying to do and getting criticism for dealing with homelessness. You know, these issues become slightly more contentious if you're the king. And also you'll be far, you know, because it becomes a constant, you've got to be careful you don't overstep the mark constitutionally by in any way clashing with your government, because even though you are there essentially as a titular role, you know, a figurehead in more ways than one, you are a part of the integral part of the constitutional monarchy, parliamentary democracy. So, you know, you have to be more careful. And I think that he would love, I'm sure, as Emily rightly says, you know, you don't want to be ever wishing your parent dead. It doesn't matter how old you are or what job you're going to get. Look at the pain that was etched across Charles's face when he took that role and gave that speech about the flights of angels to carry her to her rest. You know, it's terribly painful. And I think that William, you know, he's got quite a lot he wants to do. Not least drinking in pub with Aston Villa fans, which I'm sure is king. He football fans. I'm sure he wouldn't be able to do that if he was the king. Although it would be great if he would. So I think that no, there's no grasping for power. It doesn't work like that. There's no need to grasp for anything. He has an income that is very, very sizable from the Duchy of Cornwall. Probably what, $40 million, something like that every year. You win. That's not bad going. It's not about money. It's not about power. It's about continuity and making sure that there's a transition that works. I do believe that the king will be sharing information with William in terms of, you know, if you're restructuring things, for example, the way the palace works. Yeah, I'm sure he'll be talking to him, but he certainly won't be deferring to him in any way, because that's not how it works. It's his watch at the moment. He is the king. It's the Carolean era, as it's called, and that's what it will be. And when it's William's time, it'll be William's time, and then he can stamp his mark on what he wants to do in his reign.
We saw Prince William on Wednesday, where he was at an event praising paramedics for their stressful jobs. This was at the College of Paramedics inaugural emergency and critical care conference. And he said, you know, he was just praising them for the way that they have to act under pressure, talking about how it's not the only challenge they encounter. You're there for people in their most critical and emotional moments. Emily, do you feel like he is more passionate in the way he communicates today because of the last 12 months of his life? Or am I just sensing something that doesn't exist?
Oh, well, I think in America, you guys call them first responders. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we call them paramedics here in the UK, and I think in Ireland as well, and obviously Northern Ireland, and you guys call them first responders. So this was a conference and that William went to speak to. And I think we have to remember that effectively, William was also a paramedic in a way. When he was an air ambulance pilot, I mean, he wasn't the paramedic on board, but he would be called out to rural, he was working in East Anglia. It's an area of England. It's very rural. And when an ambulance would take too long to get somewhere, like an hour, or if it was a very critical incident, like a big road traffic accident, an air ambulance would go and William would be the pilot or the co-pilot. And as part of that job, he actually had to know first aid. And there were occurrences where he had to help at the scenes of accidents, at the scenes where the paramedics were those first responders on site, giving the patient care, and then he was flying them to hospital. So I think actually it was just a very personal thing for William. It's something that he has done himself. He's done the role. He knows how important it is not only to get the patient, the care they need immediately as quickly as possible and get them to hospital, but as he said in his speech, you're there to kind of, help other people. If there's a parent there or a loved one, you're there to kind of manage their emotions and their needs. So I think it was a very personal visit for him, really. And he is a very good public speaker. He is.
Jabbo, do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even before he was on the air ambulance, he was an RAF search and rescue pilot all around that area where he would just fly in and deal with very deep, serious emergencies. I think that there's no doubt he's had a terribly brutal year. Not only the issues that happened with his father and that all the implications that would bring to a young man of his age. Although, of course, he is the same age as King George VI was when he became, he's actually older than he was when he became king. But he was 41, the old king. He was actually, so it does seem, and he was only 56 when he died. So that when you think of things like that, you always think of the old king as much older, but he wasn't, and he was only 41 when he became king. And he had a young family as well. So these responsibilities. I do think that William is a very considered person. I think he's somebody, as Emily was saying there, that he had a lot to deal with. He has a lot of experience as a paramedic, a first responder. But I think more important for him is that he did that as a proper job, so he has empathy with them. But equally, he's somebody, I think, who has a great, empathy at dealing with people on the ground. And, we saw him talking to the people there at that conference, and he was like one of them. He was actually, and they had a lot of time for him. And, that's the difference probably between this modern monarchy and the next generation of royals, and then say the ones in the past. In the past, yeah, they had served in the military, and they'd been commanders or whatever that is. But what William has done has made him, I think, much more in tune with real people than actually previous royal, even the Queen, much more actually in touch with real people, and that's why he's got that bond with people, rather like his mother, really, in that respect. I think there's a clear connection.
When you say what William has done, explain that to me. Do you mean he has chosen certain outlets to really focus on, whether it be...
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's just what
I mean, like, he's picked particular issue. When he's done the Earthshot thing, for example, he's done it in a very different way. His father and his grandfather both, in their time, the World Wildlife Fund for the Duke of Edinburgh, and with what the Prince has done, the King has done for the environment, very strong. But what he's done is utilised it in a different way with him. Big business. He's concentrated on big business, making it a more understandable and visible campaign with a clear start and a clear end, utilising people like David Attenborough. So David Attenborough is a very visual, he's almost like an iconic, well, he is an iconic figure, not only in this country, but around the world. And utilising big business, being in New York for the UN at the time so he could do bilaterals as well and meet big business where get the money behind it, which will make the difference. And equally with issues like homelessness, he's picked a subject that his mother used to get a lot of attraction with, but he's taking it with a clear objective. By a certain time, we're going to try and achieve a certain amount. Yes, he's going to get criticised along the way. He's a very rich man, but he's trying to connect and do things actively and be true to himself. And I think that's something that is important, because he understands that, in this modern world, you've got to appeal on many platforms, from podcasting to online, to, everything from TV. It's not just newspapers as it used to be. He's got to connect in a way that people can see who he is. And I think he's doing a very good job at that, actually.
I want to ask both of you about this, because I have a theory, and Emily's going to punch me in the face over it. So I'm mentally preparing. But Prince Harry, we learned, according to the Mirror, will be given limited police protection when he returns to the UK next week. And this, of course, is after losing his legal battle for taxpayer funded security. An insider said that Prince Harry is being offered limited police protection. The Met has been trying to recruit officers on their days off because they don't have a lot of spare staff. It is understood that Harry was offered a place to stay at Buckingham Palace, but turned it down. So, Emily, here's where I think you're going to be disappointed in me. I feel like I feel like he turned it down because it continues to it allows him to continue to be like the victim in the scenario. Why, if you're completely frightened about your safety, isn't Buckingham Palace one of the safest places to be for you?
Well, it is inexplicable as to why Harry doesn't want to stay at Buckingham Palace. I think last time when the King offered him a suite at Buckingham Palace, we understood that Harry had turned it down because it wasn't secure enough. And the reason, I think it was Rob might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Harry's thinking, or his team's thinking, was that it's a very visible entrance and exit from Buckingham Palace. I mean, there are many ways in and out of Buckingham Palace, but obviously if you're going in a vehicle, there are only a certain number of entrances, and that everybody would know when he was coming or going. I personally find that bizarre. It is obviously severely heavily protected. It's one of the most fortified places in the country, Buckingham Palace. And you know, yes, when Harry comes, he's got another court case ongoing in the UK against another British newspaper, so I think he's coming to give evidence. But he's always, I'm sure Rob will know more than me, but as I understand it, ever since he went to America, when he comes back to the UK, he does get a certain level of police protection. There'll be a car, and he'll get a convoy, and there will obviously the Metropolitan Police, which is the London Police Force, never confirms or denies this. It's security. It's always like they never talk about security for obvious reasons. You want to keep the principal safe, but he's always had some level of taxpayer funded police security. It's just what he is still battling about here in the UK against his father, who is, you know, and in the British law courts, is that he doesn't have the same level of protection that he did when he was a working royal.
Yeah, and but if you have the security that you're asking for, because I believe he has been granted, although limited, armed guards when he lands, Robert, all the more security you have helping you enter and exit Buckingham Palace. Do you have a reaction to, because people are going to say this?
I mean, I think that we should be looking at how much this all costs. And I think that Harry should really say it should be a case of, if you don't accept the armed guards outside Buckingham Palace and the people that is in that place, then why should the taxpayer be funding you to have extra? You know, because you're staying in a hotel. It just seems really, you know, slightly arrogant, actually, because there'll be an awful lot more police that's going to be required. But you've got to remember that the way that these things work is that the police commissioner, who I was sitting next to the other day at dinner, he's got a job to do, and his job will take a view, and his job will be, well, it's going to come back on me. If I don't do something, it's my decision what level I can afford him. Now, we don't know, because they never, as Emily said, they never discussed the level. But if I was the police commissioner and Harry was coming over and I thought some person might cause trouble on my beat, then I would somehow find, in my huge budget that they have, enough people to make sure that it doesn't happen on my watch. Because the last thing you want, if you're the commissioner of police, is someone say, you know, an inquiry which costs millions of pounds as to why you didn't do something. So it's a lot easier to appoint a few extra policemen, or maybe a couple with the guns, than it is, and put them in the background without and write it off on a docket, than it is to be, you know, giving evidence before an inquiry if something happens. So really, we don't really know what the security level is going to be, and that's down to you know, to Mark to work out, and he probably will make sure that nothing happens on his watch. But I think Harry, you know, if you want, one thing that did come up in discussion when he was doing, I'm not going to call it Megxit because I'll be called whatever by Harry, but you know, when they decided to say they wanted to be part-time royals and go and live in wherever they were going to live then, and all this. was that came up in conversation with his father. There's no doubt it did. That was one of the main things. What are you going to do about security? Because it was obvious. That is the big cost of the monarchy, and and it's expensive. But I think that the commissioner's not going to take any chances at all. He just won't. And why would you? If you were in that role, you would not want to be saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't do that because it cost an extra 30,000." For them, it's a drop in the ocean, and that's how they will justify it somewhere.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that Emily and I didn't disagree on that. We didn't, right? Did we not
No,
disagree? Okay.
don't think
Still best friends. I was wondering if you saw the letters that Prince Harry's security team sent to the NYPD regarding the May 2023 incident after the Gracie Awards. The Daily Mail got some of those emails through the Freedom of Information Act, and they dropped right before Christmas. And they're kind of threatening, where Prince Harry is saying he's going to go to his friend California Governor Gavin Newsom to find the right contact in case he has to file a complaint against the NYPD, because he wants these paparazzi arrested, and he wants them arrested within like 24 hours. Are Harry and Meghan kind of a pain in the butt when it comes to travel and security? Do normal people communicate this way, and are they this aggressive?
Go on, Rob. Well, you take this one.
I just refer you back to what the taxi driver said at the time about this so-called fast speed chase through New York. It was almost laughed at, wasn't it? I mean, even a lot of the New York television stations and networks were saying, what, a car chase at high speed through New York, you walk faster, so it was almost laughed out of, when it was said at the time. The taxi driver completely sort of rubbished their claims. I think they'd do anything when it comes to these things. I think they're very keen to highlight issues, and they were trying to make out that was almost like the chase in Paris. Now, the world from 1997 to 2025 is a very different world in terms of media landscape, very different. And no matter what he says, I think, unfortunately for Harry, whether he's traumatized or what, I don't doubt he is by the loss of his mother. It's a terrible, terrible thing when it happens, even whoever you are. But I think he thinks the media is the same as 1997. And it isn't. There are certain rules and regulations, as Emily alluded to earlier, or said earlier. It's a very different landscape. And I think to even compare what went on in Paris in 97 to what happened in New York is just pretty awful, actually, and not true. And I think some of the claims that were made.
You're right, because there were packages that were played about Diana's death right before we talked about it on that day. So
it was outrageous. It was done. I think it was this ridiculous way of dealing with it. I don't doubt I've never had the experience, although he did pat me outside the High Court, Harry, when I was going to the High Court to do a talk for a TV show. And I saw him drive past in his blacked out windows, and he took a photo, him and his bodyguard took a photo of me. So I felt insulted. I felt violated.
I hope he makes
I was going to go and cry in the corner about it. Oh, did I? Oh, no, I didn't. I thought, and in fact, what happened was a guy walked up to me from behind. I thought, who's this? In London, you would think someone's about to nick your watch or something, or smack you over the head. He said, that bloke in that car is taking pictures of you. I turned around, it was Harry and his ex-police bodyguard. So God knows what that was all about. I mean, I was actually,
you could sue him, Rob.
I was at the High Court, just about to do I think I'd gone to the wrong court. I'd gone to the old thing, and I'd actually had to do a TV interview. But that bloke's taking photographs of you, and it was him. So I felt violated. I was going to cry, but I didn't.
All right. Well, we have just a few. We have literally 2 minutes, so I will ask Emily and Rob Job separately. Was it right for Meghan Markle to push her Netflix show to March 4th after the fires? Emily?
Yes, I think it was. I think, obviously that's devastating in Los Angeles, and, thousands of people are without their homes. I think I'm not quite sure how many people have died, but at least 20 or 30 people died Yeah, it's terrible. It's a national disaster. It's a state disaster. It's a national disaster. It's terrible. So I think it would have been very, very difficult for Meghan to kind of waft through a rented house in California, showing her gracious cooking and flower arranging, and what a gracious hostess she is, and encouraging us all to elevate the ordinary. When obviously nobody can really be hosting or entertaining anyone right now. In Los Angeles or the greater environment of LA, because everyone has had to flee their homes or have lost their homes. So it would be, so yes, absolutely the right decision. Although I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that Meghan had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, I do too.
It would have been Netflix, right? Netflix would have decided that it was the right thing to do to postpone it, which is kind of a kindness, I think, to Meghan, because had it gone ahead, I think she would have just been, it wasn't her decision, I don't think, but had it gone ahead, then she would have been absolutely castigated from here to eternity for being so tone deaf and, you know, pursuing money at all costs.
Rob Job, 2 minutes. What is your response to that?
Well, the cakes look nice that she's making, I suppose, but now I think this whole thing about her being accused of disaster tourism and all this, yeah, it was the right move, but at the same time, her timing on most things, sadly for her, has been pretty awful, actually. I also think that they, you know, these sort of programs are pretty dull, and if that's all we've got, you know, with them, if that's all they've got to do now, it doesn't bode well for the future. I mean, I think surely I think when they set out to do their own thing, they were going to do groundbreaking things. They were going to help the world. They were going to help save the world. I remember being in South Africa. It was all about they're going to do some great things even before they declared they were leaving. You know, big exciting things. I'm not overly excited by a few cakes and pots of jam.
But it's safe. It's a safe space, and maybe that's where we need to be right now.
But everyone's got to eat, so let's not be too
Oh yeah. All right. I am highly food motivated. All right. Agree with us, disagree with us. Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. Emily Andrews, Robert Jobson, two of my favorite people. I had so much fun with you today. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.